22 minutes before 7 o'clock here on Morning Live. Now, let's just focus our attention a little bit to something very worrying, of course. South Africa has been ranked last in reading of the 50 participating countries in international comparison studies that measured literacy levels between 2011 and 2016. This is according to the Progress in International Reading Literacy Study, PIRLS, report that was released on Tuesday. Now, the literacy crisis here at home in South Africa is far worse than previously thought, with the discovery that 78% of grade 4 learners are unable to read. Joining us now is Professor Mary Metcalfe. She's former MEC for Education here in Gauteng, and she's currently with the University of Johannesburg as a Senior Research Associate. Prof, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, Felicia.
Now, you and I were having a conversation off air about this report, but let's just get your views on the report. Did it really surprise you?
It always disappoints, and we always hope that we're doing better. But I think it's a very good opportunity for the country to sit back and say what's going wrong, because our young people deserve better. And if we don't get it right by grade 4, it means that we are undermining their ability to achieve their potential, which the country needs, because it's our greatest resource going forward, is the talent, the intelligence of our people.
And you were also telling me off air about the importance of this grade 4, because that's where learners actually start to do different subjects with different teachers. Talk to us about that grade, the importance of that grade.
Okay, so the situation in South African schools is that all learners begin school learning in the language that they're familiar with, which is correct.
Yes.
If they're going to change their medium of instruction, they need to learn the language they're going to learn in. So for the majority of South African learners, particularly those in rural areas, semi-urban areas, they will start off in a home language, which is usually an African language. They learn to read in the African language while they learn English as a second language, and generally they transition to English in grade 4. So you move from the foundation phase where you've had a single teacher into grade 4, where suddenly it's a wider curriculum, more teachers usually, reliance on textbooks, and you're learning in English which you haven't learned in before. So what these results tell us is that by the time our learners in grade 4 need to be able to read, to understand in order to learn, they don't yet have sufficient reading for comprehension. Sure. And it's the for comprehension that's important.
Sure. Now, you make mention of learners in the rural areas, and the report really talks about the children, of course, who live in your rural areas, in your townships, that they have the lowest reading literacy scores. 23 years later into democracy, our education policies, are they not addressing this sufficiently?
So education policies, there's such a range, but if we focus on education policies around reading, what is very good about this report is it isn't just a report card that says we failed. It looks at reading comprehension and it relates it to context. So it relates how is this child doing in reading relative to safety and security at school, relative to the availability of books at school, relative to the availability of books at home, relative to how hungry they are, relative to bullying. So it puts reading in context, that there's a variety of issues related to school functioning, resources, and well-being, and home life that impact on reading. Now that's important because it helps us with understanding where we need to intervene.
Yeah. All right. So it also takes into consideration the external factors. It's not just about school-related matters. And this report, Prof, it was released, as I said, by the National Research Coordinator, Professor Sarah Howie, from the University of Pretoria. But it was commissioned by the Department of Basic Education. But I think the question really here, against which countries were we measured?
Okay, so there's a list of about 50 countries, and it ranges from Russia, which did very well at the top, and I was with Professor Howie yesterday, and she was saying one of the recommendations of the report is that we need to devote more time to reading and the practice of reading and the teaching of reading.
Do we have the resources, though, the books, libraries?
Okay, that I'm going to come to. But she was saying that Russia, which is at the top, spends 40% of the school time reading. Now, you're correct. How do you spend time reading without books? And that's one of the biggest challenges. Is that I think it was 96% of the learners said it may not be 96%, about 64% of schools don't have libraries. Now, if you want to learn to read, you need to practice reading. You need to have access to books. So there's not enough books in school. There's not enough exciting and interesting books in African languages. That's the second big thing. We have to flood our schools with reading material that's interesting, that children read for meaning. At the moment, much of the teaching of reading is very sterile. It's separate from real meaning for children. It becomes chanting. Yeah. So for many older South Africans will remember from the DET and from Homeland something called the grade 2 reader or the grade 3 reader, and you basically memorized the book. You didn't actually interact with the text. Children need to read independently with material that's interesting to them.
Yes. And just quickly, Prof, on this one of the issues that are always lamented by the NGOs, such as Your Equal Education, is the fact that the teachers themselves do not have adequate skills and the necessary skills. Yeah. So is this contributing?
So teachers tend to teach as they were taught. The recommendations of the report are very clear that we need intensive work in supporting teachers, in giving them access to new methodologies and new pedagogy, in giving them the material that will help them teach better, giving them material so that they can do individual reading, that they can do group reading. It's also very clear that we need to reduce class sizes in foundation phase. For the teaching of reading, you need to be able to be in touch with each child. If you've got a class, and the average in the study was at more than 55, I've been in classes where 60, 70 children are learning to read. The only way the teacher can do it is to chant. Reduce class sizes, give more support to teachers, provide more resources, and then the report is also very clear. In the country, you can see the parts of the country where learning is suppressed. You can see it in the NSC results every year, and we shouldn't be surprised. But the same pattern that you see in the NSC results, you see here.
Yes, yes.
Rural, poor, periphery, far from the urban centres, historically homeland.
Prof, there is so much to talk about with this report, but unfortunately we've run out of time. We'll make another day. Thank you so much for coming through.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. That was Professor Mary Metcalfe. She's an education specialist and a senior research associate at University of Johannesburg, commenting on the international report findings that South African grade 4 students cannot read. At Morning Live SABC, it's our Twitter handle. Let's hear your views on this. We're taking a quick break. When we come back, we're going back to Pretoria. That's where Leanne is this morning.